Think about it. When we hear the name Adam Morrison, what comes to mind? If you're like most people, you probably remember him as the guy who cried and washed out of the NBA. But what about everything else? Do we remember the hard work he put in to get to that point? Do we remember the obstacles he faced along the way? I don't think so. I think the reason we tend to remember only the negative is that it's easier. It's easier to write someone off as a failure than to empathize with their struggles. It's easier to believe that success is just a matter of luck, rather than acknowledging the hard work and sacrifice it takes to get there. But the truth is, life is unpredictable. No matter how hard we work, there are no guarantees. And sometimes, even the most determined among us will fall short. Now, I know you've probably seen his highlights a million times, but trust me on this one, it's worth watching them again, especially his final game with Gonzaga. I mean, that was just pure magic. Morrison was an absolute beast on the court, and watching him play was a treat for any basketball fan out there. But even if you don't want to watch that specific game, any video from Morrison's final season at Gonzaga will do. The dude was just so talented, and his playing style was nothing short of spectacular. Although his college career ended in disappointment when his team, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, blew a 17-point lead against UCLA in the Sweet 16 of the 2006 NCAA tournament, Morrison still managed to walk away with some major accolades. He was named the co-player of the year alongside Duke's J.J. Redick, the WCC Player of the Year, and even won the Chevrolet Player of the Year award. But that's not all. He was also the proud recipient of the prestigious Oscar Robertson Trophy. That's pretty impressive, right? Well, after such an outstanding season, Morrison decided to forego his senior year with the Bulldogs and declare for the NBA draft. In the 2006 NBA draft, Morrison ended up being taken by the Charlotte Bobcats with the 3rd overall pick. Now, this decision has been widely criticized by basketball pundits and fans alike, and for good reason. You see, Morrison was a college superstar, no doubt about it. But when it came to the NBA, he just didn't live up to the hype. Morrison was picked by Michael Jordan, who had just taken over as the new manager of basketball operations. And let's be honest, Jordan's draft record hasn't been the best. But still, Morrison was a big name with big stats, so it's not hard to see why Jordan and company were swayed by his potential. But the thing is, the Bobcats could have had 4 future All-Stars instead. That's right, 4. So it's easy to understand why this draft decision has been labeled as one of the most questionable in the Bobcats' history. Morrison didn't really make a name for himself during his time in the league, and that's probably because he didn't have enough time to develop his on-court identity. But when people do remember him, it's often as a willowy shooter with the willowy mustache. However, during his time at Gonzaga, Morrison was a force. He hit an impressive 42.8% of his 5.2 three-point attempts per game. But that was just a fraction of his overall shot attempts. Morrison was also deadly inside the arc, making his way to the line almost 10 times a game and shooting an impressive 52.3% on 2-pointers. He was also an absolute killer in the mid-range. He could shoot off the dribble or back his defender down in the post and shoot over the top like it was nobody's business. He was also a master at running off screens and curls around the elbows, finishing over much bigger, stronger players, or dropping in a variety of floaters and runners. But when you look back at his game, you start to notice that a lot of his points came from making some pretty tough shots. And in hindsight, that might have been a bit of a red flag. Don't get me wrong, the guy was a scoring machine, but relying too much on tough shots can be a problem in the long run. Morrison had a pretty good start, scoring a whopping 30 points against the Indiana Pacers on December 30th, 2006. That's a pretty impressive feat for a rookie, but unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse. Midway through the season, Morrison was benched by the Bobcats. Why? Well, it was mainly due to his lack of defensive play. I mean, let's face it, defense is a big part of the game, and if you're not pulling your weight on that end of the court, it's going to be hard to stay in the game. To make matters worse, Morrison's shooting percentage was abysmal, coming in at 37%. It's tough to justify playing someone who's not playing well on either end of the court, but playing with Matt Carroll and a rapidly expanding Raymond Felton as the other primary perimeter scoring threats meant he didn't have many opportunities. He didn't have much of a chance to show off his skills because he was playing with some heavy hitters on his team. Matt and Raymond were taking most of the shots and leaving him with limited opportunities to really shine. During his second season, in a preseason game on October 21st, 2007, Morrison tore his ACL. As a result, he had to miss the entire season. And when he returned, he never really regained his footing. And after a lackluster start to his career in Charlotte, Morrison was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers in a multiplayer deal. Now, you would think playing for one of the most storied franchises in NBA history would be a dream come true, right? Wrong. Morrison's playing time was minimal, to say the least. In fact, he didn't even earn a single start in his 2 seasons with the Lakers. The Lakers won NBA championships in both of Morrison's seasons with the team, but he hardly got to contribute to those victories. And as fate would have it, Morrison was released at the end of the 2009-2010 NBA season, effectively ending his stint with the Lakers. After he was let go by the Lakers, he was picked up by the Washington Wizards, but unfortunately, he was waived during the training camp. After that, he tried his luck overseas, playing in a Turkish basketball league, but even there, he faced the same problem: lack of playing time. He stuck around for 2 seasons, but ultimately decided to quit and come back home. That's what Adam Morrison was. But if you want to indulge your imagination and make some room in your memory for what he could have been, try watching him when he dropped a career-high 30 points on the Indiana Pacers, shooting the lights out from the field. Or his 22-game run with Red Star Belgrade, where he put up some impressive numbers, averaging 17.6 points, 3.6 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per 36 minutes, while shooting over 50% from the inside of the arc and nearly 38% from beyond it. Or just imagine him landing in the league a few years from 2006, where his shooting and length would be major assets in the popular spread and switch schemes. And on a team where Michael Jordan wasn't the primary investor and Bernie Bickerstaff wasn't the head coach, and also where Felton, Brevin Knight, Gerald Wallace, and Emeka Okafor didn't round out the starting lineup. Yes, the 2006 NBA draft class was one of the weakest draft classes we've seen in the last 2 decades. But don't get me wrong, there were still some gems in there. We had players like Brandon Roy, Rajon Rondo, and Kyle Lowry, who were all selected below Adam Morrison, who was the 3rd overall pick. Now, that just goes to show you that potential doesn't always translate to success in the NBA. Bad habits. We all know that some players have their own unique habits, and sometimes they can rub their teammates the wrong way. Well, it turns out that Morrison has some habits that didn't sit well with his teammates. One of his teammates, Jared Dudley, spilled the tea on Morrison's disgusting habits behind closed doors. You know how it goes down during media day. Reporters always trying to get some dirt on the players, and that's exactly what happened to Jared Dudley on the Washington Wizards in 2015. Now, imagine this. You're at media day, and a reporter asks you about your worst dressed or most disgusting teammate. But what'd you say? Jared Dudley didn't hesitate for a second, and he straight up nominated Morrison. Dudley said he never took showers. He did the chewing tobacco that he spit all the time, and he wore the same 3 polos the whole year. This is a guy who made a lot of money too at that time. He was the face of diabetes. He was doing everything. He was on the cover of college games. He was everywhere, and he was by far the worst and disgusting. Dudley wasn't the only Bobcat who noticed Morrison's lack of hygiene, though. Dudley continued. Gerald Wallace had to force him to take a shower one time. Had to force him. Imagine that. Imagine forcing a grown man to take a shower. He should be ashamed of himself. I mean, think about it, guys. Morrison had the talent, skills, and work ethic to be successful in the NBA. But sometimes things just don't go our way, and that's okay. I guess the bottom line is, you don't have to remember Adam Morrison at all. Gray matter is limited, and there are certainly more important things to take up mental real estate. But if you do save some space for him, don't forget that he was a freaking baller.